Okay, so thank you very much, Martin, for that introduction. And look, welcome everybody. Welcome. I can see already from the attendee chat that we have got people from all over the world, and I'm delighted to be able to be with you today. Look, let's get on with the session. Now, first of all, very briefly, let me introduce myself. My name is Tom Clendon. I am an ACCA member, so I did these exams myself. You'll notice that logo in the top right-hand corner there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a professional, and I know many of you are on LinkedIn as well. When I qualified, I was studying, juggling my professional life with my studies, and I used to work for KPMG, but then I spent many years working at Kaplan. But I've been involved in the online world now for 8 years. I used to be with a company called FME Learn Online, and now I am effectively a freelancer on my own. That's about me. I live, I breathe, I love SBR. Now, what are we doing in this session? We are going to cover 4 things. The first thing we're looking at is the examiner's report, the latest examiner's report. I want to have a look at the study hub. I want to talk you through some effective examination strategies, and perhaps for some of you, the most important thing, live Q&A. I am here to answer your questions about SBR. Okay, and I will do my best at the end to leave some time and to address as many of those questions as possible. Now, if you want your question addressed by me, please put it in the Q&A session. Please put it in the Q&A folder, yeah? Specifically for that, rather than the general chat, yeah? I mean, this is the general chat, yeah? And I'll be using the general chat to, yeah, this is the general chat, that's me. I'll be using the general chat to make sure you're still awake, make sure you're still there from time to time. 4 things to get through. We have an hour. The ACCA do publish past exam questions. This session is recorded. Everybody who's signed up will get sent a link of the copy of the recording. So if you have to go, you have to go. The September and December last exam was released. So this is a hybrid exam, and the examiner has written a report. And he has therefore, the examining team, yeah, male and female, the examining team have given us the benefit of their insights as to how students did, yeah, on the recent exams. Now, I want to take you through an 8-mark question. And in order to understand the examiner's reports and the comments the examiner has made, we need to effectively understand part of a question. And this question, and we are starting with the requirement, part A, using Exhibit 1. Yeah, using Exhibit 1. And this means that you don't need to read Exhibit 2 or Exhibit 3 in order to answer part A of the question. Time is so precious in the exam. Using Exhibit 1, yeah, and in accordance with the standard, explain why layout does not control brassic. That is the requirement of the question. And so when we read the exhibit, we are reading it through the prism of knowing what we're being asked. Why does layout not control brassic? Now, in the exam, you haven't got the benefit of the marking guide, but I can always slightly predict what might be in the marking guide because I've always looked at the marking guide. So let's look at the marking guide, benefit of hindsight. What the marking guide was for. 4 marks for principles, theory, definition, relating to the standard, of course, relating to the scenario, of course, but 4 marks. 7 marks for the discussion. How good are you at maths? How good are you at maths? This is an 8-mark question. And so the maximum number of marks you can be awarded is 8, even though in theory, there are potentially 11 different marks up for grabs. You will be maxed out at 8. There is no point in giving a perfect answer, because by giving a perfect answer, you've gone over the top. You've wasted time. You're not going to get a 9th or 10th mark. So bear that in mind. The other thing to bear in mind is, of course, how much time you're going to spend on this question. And we'll be talking about time management later on, because the examiner talks about time management a lot. So this is the scenario. Your year end is 31st December, and we're told on the 1st of January, Layout has acquired 45%. I'm thinking associate. 45%. Because it doesn't control Brassic, does it? On the acquisition of those shares, Layout could appoint 5 executive directors. So executive directors are the ones that make the decisions. Non-execs don't really count. And there's confirmation of it that there are 12 executive directors. So we are able to appoint 5 of the 12. Okay, that's not a majority. We're able to appoint 5 of the 12. And it's these executive directors that make all the key decisions. All right. So we are Layout. We own 45% of the shares, and we've appointed 5 of the 12 directors, not a majority. Now, if we own 55% of the shares, someone else owns the other 55%, and these are owned by one other person, and that other private investor appoints 7 of the executive directors. Now, there's something quite complicated, and there's something quite interesting, that you are told that Layout has got a forward contract that gives it the ability, gives it the ability to purchase a 10%, a forward contract. Now, when this is exercised, it will be an October X8, not now, but in October X8, it has a contract to buy an additional 10%. When it buys those 10%, that doesn't help it appoint any more directors. Now, Layout believes that it's a subsidiary. I am going to show you my answer. And then I want you to think about the quality, the length, the accuracy, and whether my answer is any good. Yeah? There is the whole exhibit. There is the whole exhibit. All right? And this is how my answer goes. I've gone for some low-hanging fruit. I've gone with the fact that we own 45% of the shares, and therefore this is significant influence, and therefore this is associate. And if it is an associate, you have board representation. So there is further evidence of the associate status because we've got representation on the board. Notice how that is applied. Notice how I'm using the word Brassic. I'm referring directly to the number of executive directors that they hold. And now I'm describing equity accounting because it's not a sub, it is an associate. If it is an associate, then we equity account. If we equity account, that's single line accounting. And, you know, that means that in the balance sheet, the statement of financial position, you're increasing the investment in the associates post-acquisition retained earnings. Maybe there are some people who are attending this webinar who actually did this in the exam, this question in the exam. It's a past exam question. on which the examiner has reported forms the basis of his report. Now, I quite like what I've done here because I have said 4 things. I have said 4 things. You are my judge and my jury. I would like you to tell me in the chat how many marks this answer is worth. How many marks is the answer that I have just shown you? How many marks is it worth? I am waiting on your response. You've got to put yourself in the shoes of a marker. You've got to understand. Mariam says 4. Sana says 4. Sirium says 4. Jatin says 4. Craig says 4. You are very, very kind to me. Coriander says 4. Omar says 4. Kat says 4. Ian, I love you. Ian is an independent person. Oh, it's going so quick. Mohammed says only 3. Gold says only 3. No, we don't do half marks. We don't do half marks. Umar is giving me 2. Elizabeth is only giving me 2. It's no way is it worth 6 because I've only said 4 things. Right. Let's do a timeout. Let's do a timeout. Yeah? The first paragraph, the second paragraph, oh, Orlando, I like you. Orlando, big respect. Big respect, Orlando. It's not a solid 4. It's not a solid 4 in any way, shape, or form. Umar, you're stealing my punchlines. Technically, what I'm writing, I'm a grandfather. Yeah? And my grandson has just turned 3 years old and he's begun to talk. And I said to him the other day, what's your name? I mean, I know his name, but I was having a conversation with him. I said, what's your name? And he replied, I am 3 years old. Now, technically what he says is correct. He is 3 years old. But I gave him 0 marks. I said, no, you failed the exam. You've not answered the question. Technically, everything I've written there is true. It is true that you own 45%. It's true it's an associate. But that is not explaining why layout does not control Brassic. It is true that we appoint 5 of the 7 executive directors, but that is not explaining why layout doesn't control Brassic. It is true that associates are equity accounting, but that is not explaining why layout does not control Brassic. It is true that equity account, but it's not answering the question. The reason the circles are there is my answer is worth absolutely zip. And when I read the examiner's report specifically says an explanation of why Brassic is an associate was not required. That's what I've just done. I've explained why it's an associate. Oh, Tiandi, missing P. I love it. You must be extremely well taught. You must have a fantastic teacher. Yeah? Now, in the examiner's report, these are direct quotes from the examiner's report. You do not need to explain why. You do not need to explain why it is an associate. You do not need to explain equity accounting. No marks were available for this. And therefore, I want to be positive with you. I want to be positive with you. If we're going to explain why layout does not control Brassic, I think there are some easy marks available, some low-hanging fruit or some low-hanging vegetables, yeah, which suggest what control is. And if you know the mnemonic PEA, you are halfway to getting some easy marks. Layout only holds 45% of the shares. Control is normally achieved by holding a majority of the shares. Control, however, is not a number. To me, that's a lovely, easy start. Explain why layout does not control, because it doesn't own the majority of the shares. Normally, a sub is something that you have the majority. This is 8 marks. So we've got something there that we can start with. This is a strong start. Kiss. Kiss. Keep it simple. State the obvious. Answer the question. Yeah? Why is it not a sub? Why does it not control? Because you haven't got a majority of the shares. Right? That's a far better start. Now, having got that start, PEA, there are 3 conditions. P, power. So here we are laying out those power, exposure, and ability. In the exam, you're using the keyboard. In the exam, you're able to type out, you're able to kind of dump down the 3 criteria that all have to be met for it to be control. And these criteria are not all met. You need to have the power to direct the operation. You need to have exposure to variable returns. I'm on the cusp. I'm on the cusp of passing. I'm on the cusp. I've earned at least 2, maybe 3 marks. If I'm going to go over the 4-mark threshold, I'm going to start doing some application so I can go back in and I can edit. It doesn't have the power to direct because we only appoint 5 executive directors. Can you see I am linking the theory to the question? Can you see I'm answering the question? Why does it not control? Because all 3 conditions have to be met. The full form of P is power, P for power, E for exposure, A for ability. P for power, E for exposure, A for ability. Now, we do have exposure to variable returns. We do. Because if you own 45% of the shares, if the company does well and pays a big dividend or the share price goes up, you do well out of it. So layout does have variable returns. It does. But remember, you need all 3 conditions to be met. You have the ability to exercise the power, exposure, and ability. Thank you. But do you know what? Although I'm convinced I have now got 4, maybe 5 marks, I still think there is some low-hanging fruit to be had, because there was a reference in the question to this forward contract. And when you've got something like that, you need to consider all the relevant circumstances. Now, you can read there the punchline. I've given it away. The forward contract is next year, October X8, if I'm not mistaken. And when you exercise that option, you don't get more directors. So you're not actually in control. If I want to be really posh, academic, technical, it's not a substantive option because you can't play it today. It doesn't really affect us. So this does not give us control. I am not claiming that my answer is worth 11 marks. If you want to see an 11-mark answer, look at the examiner's answer. I'm not even claiming my answer is worth 8 marks either. What I do know is this answer, and you've seen how I've constructed it. Start with a low-hanging fruit. It's not a sub because you don't own a majority. PEA, and then backfill, and then finally deal with the option, the forward contract. In those circumstances, you see how I've constructed the answer. So I would be very comfortable in telling you that this answer is 6 out of 8, 7 out of 8, almost a prize-winning answer. I think in the exam, well, I know in the examiner's report, some people actually were getting 8 out of 8 for this particular section. If you have a technical question that you want me to answer, please put that in the Q&A. So I'm sorry to tease you, but I know that some students write down facts and think because they're writing down facts, they will earn marks. You can earn marks from definitions, from facts, but they have to be answering the question and they have to be applied. Yeah. And you can see here how I've just taken it on a little bit. Yeah. This is worth more than 4. This is worth more than 4. All right. This is a very, very clear pass. It is not the length or detail of the examiner's answer, but it is nevertheless a clear pass. Whereas previously, you were very generous, at a number of you awarding me 4 marks for describing equity accounting, saying it's an associate, justifying it's an associate. That is not answering the question, though. And I pause. And I pause. Good. Right. We are doing 4 things. And one of the things we are doing is discovering the study hub. And in order to discover the study hub, I am going to do something which is quite dangerous. I'm going to be sharing my screen. So what you should be able to see on the screen now is the study hub. I know, I have been told that there is a correlation between those people who pass the exam and those people who've been on the study hub. Yeah, there is a correlation between those people who've been on the practice platform and those people who pass the exam as well. And I wanted to take 5 minutes, just in case you haven't seen it, what the study hub looks like. Now, the study hub is not only here for SBR, but it's here for all of the exams. And this is really a knowledge-based thing. And if you're doing the March exam, you probably, well, I would hope you're dipping in to the study hub rather than systematically working through it. You've got the knowledge now. So look, it's broken down into 22, right? Now, we've been looking at the conceptual principles of group accounts. So if you click on it, it drops down. And we've been looking here at the definition of control. So some people were asking in the chat, oh, what does P mean? What is control? Well, it's a definition. It's within the standard. Yeah. Control exists when the investor is exposed to, has rights or variable returns. Yeah. 3 elements of control are power. Yeah. Power, exposure, and ability to affect the return. So, you know, if you're in a war zone or if you've got agreements with shareholders that prevent you from exercising the power, then that would prohibit. Now, not only do you get given the definition in the study hub, but you get given also some explanation as to what is going on and some examples. So, you know, it's good to learn through examples. And here we are. Here's a different scenario. Here we've got Mojave, who's acquired 45% of the shares. But in our exam question, the other 55 are owned by one person. And I think it was their sub. We didn't have an agreement with them. It wasn't a joint venture. In this scenario, the other shares are owned by hundreds of unrelated individuals, none of whom own more than 1%. And therefore, we're told that few investors vote. Well, Mojave is going to win the vote because it's got a block of 45 and the other 55 are just like, they don't care. They don't turn up. So only 2 or 3 will turn up. 4 or 5 turn up. 10 of them turn up. And anyway, they may not agree with each other if they do turn up. So you're always going to win because of the silent minority. And that's explained. It's always important to read the question, understand what is going on. And then we talk about share options. The point is it goes on. The point is that you've got information here, yeah, that enables you. And not only have you got, but you've also got access to more material, questions, yeah, as well. So if you're unfamiliar with the Study Hub, that's a little teaser. If you are familiar with the Study Hub, thank you for your patience. And I am moving back to my presentation. Yeah, because we have done a little bit of sharing and discussion around the Study Hub. So there were 4 things I was doing. Can we write the answer presented here in bullet points or in very simple language? I'm very comfortable with simple language. I'm very comfortable with simple language. But examiners, you're doing a professional exam. They don't want text speak. They don't really want too aggressive abbreviations or bullet points. You can earn a mark from a well-polished sentence. Yeah, don't just write down a series of random words. You wouldn't do that at work. All right, you wouldn't do that at work. Right. This session has not stopped. I am here. Candidates are required to answer questions in the order in which they are presented. Is this true or false? Musa says true. Alice says false. Yeah, Orlando says false. Jonathan says false. The majority are saying false. Yeah, Leah says false. Yeah, I think Jean is also a candidate for saying false. What is the right answer? The right answer is false. Just because it's called question 1 doesn't mean to say you have to do question 1. Yeah? This is a direct quote from the examiner's report. Yes, you can start with question 4. Yes, Amaka, you can start with question 4 if you want to. Liz, you're absolutely right. You can do the questions in any order that you want to. So candidates are not required to answer the questions in the order in which they are presented. You choose the order in which you present. So this is what the examiner's report saying. The examining team are giving you practical exam tips, practical advice as to how to pass the exam. The logic is select a question which boosts your confidence and can be answered well within the time allocation. This can reduce stress. If you're doing a 400-meter race, yeah, get off to a good start. Get off to a good start. Feel comfortable. Run that first 100 meters, especially if it's a relay, put one of your stronger runners at the front of the relay. You choose the question that is going to boost your confidence and can be done within the time allocation. This is not a true or false. This is not a true or false. Yeah, but is a 1, 2, 3, or 4. ACCA know these things because it's a computer-based exam. They know how long you spend on each question, and they can look at the big data and they can get a pattern. Carolina says 1. Kat says 1. Hamza says 1. Scott says 1. Everybody is saying 1. Well, almost. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Well done. Well done. This is good. Or it's sort of nice in a way to preach to the converted, but the evidence is always that students overrun on question 1. But you know that you overrun on question 1, so why are you doing it? Why are you overrunning on question 1? Is it difficult? I think the whole exam is difficult, isn't it? If you overrun on question 1, if you do question 1 first and then you overrun on it, you're on the back foot. You're on the back foot. Yeah? So I think you need to discover these lessons for yourself by doing mock exams to time. Yeah? This is something that I say all the time. And I haven't made it up. I'm not kind of trying to wind you up. I'm here representing ACCA. I'm not the examiner. But I can read the examiner's report. You can read the examiner's report. And if the examiner's report is saying something, maybe we should all listen. Maybe we should all listen. The temptation to overrun in question 1 is more to gain more of the challenging marks is likely to be at the cost of losing more straightforward marks in the final question. You are not interested in passing question 1 and failing the exam. You're interested in passing the exam. Answers which present knowledge-based facts with minimal application are likely to score well. True or false? True or false? Yeah. This is not skills. This is not kindergarten. This is not skills. This is strategic professional. All right. Yes, you get marks for facts. You do. You know, PEA, that was earning you marks. It was. But it's not enough. It's never enough. You know this. You know this. Yeah. I know this. You know this. And yet the examiner's report seems to indicate that there are still students who are rabbits in the headlights, who are like, oh, what is true? And this is a direct quote from the examiner's report. What is true? And this is a direct quote from the examiner's report. If they merely present knowledge-based facts with minimal application, they're unlikely to score well. Yeah, or to give it the full quote. This is the full quote from the examiner's report. The examining team's report. 4 exams a year. It's more than one person's effort. There's a professional team who produce these exams. As I hope you saw in the answer that I constructed, it is possible to earn good marks without necessarily writing hundreds and hundreds of words. You've got to get to the point. You've got to be direct. Yeah. Conservative in this context means minimal, means relatively small, means, yeah, you don't have to write words and you don't have to write a lot. Get to the point. I'm not talking about the Beatles record album. I'm not promoting a brand of iPhone. I am getting across to you that in this exam, you need to do 3 things. And it's application, application, application. Yeah, knowing that tomato is a fruit is knowledge. Making sure a tomato is not put in a fruit salad is wisdom. Make sure you apply your knowledge correctly. So, exam strategy. And my exam strategy on this presentation was directly lifted, was directly inspired by the contents of the examiner's report on the September-December 2024 exam. Do your best question first. Do it to time. Build your confidence. I'm not telling you what question that is, because the last time I looked, you were all 18 or older. You're all adults. You're all doing mock exams. You all have strengths and weaknesses. Some of you love ethics. So some of you will be drawn to question 2 to do it first. Some of you might prefer the accounting. Some of you might legitimately like group accounts, are competent at doing it within the time because you've practiced past exam questions and you've got the ability to move on, and therefore you do question 1 first. Fine, just do it as a conscious choice. That's all I'm saying. Make conscious decisions. Make conscious decisions. Now, the examiner didn't actually use the words, well, Scott, if you hate it all, you don't have to do ACCA, you don't have to do SBR. I love it all, my friend. I love it all. All right? So, yeah, fake it until you can make it, Scott. All right? So, the examiner doesn't use the phrase JMO. That is one that I use. Maybe I should copyright it. What does JMO stand for? Does anybody know what JMO stands for? I'm glad you think SBR is lovely, Uma. Does anybody know what JMO stands for? Thank you. Yeah, just move on. And maybe that's what I should be doing. Yeah, just move on. You know, it's an 8-mark question. The answer I gave wasn't worth 8. It may have only been worth 6 or 7. Well, that's enough. You know, it's only a few people who get 90% in the exam. And the risk of perfection, the risk of going for perfection, is that you fail the exam. All right? So this is a smash and grab. This is a time-pressured examination. Best question first, just move on. Apples. ATQ. When I was a student, my teacher used to tell me to ATFQ. And he was asking me to answer the full question to make sure that you deal with every part of every question. Right, here we go. Live Q&As. Now, I've already seen there is a healthy number of questions that have come in. Are there any topics that are guaranteed to come up in every exam, e.g. question 2, ethics? Well, you've given the best example. You've given the best example. Within the exam, question 1 is on groups, question 2 is on ethics, question 3 and 4 are on accounting standards with a twist on investor focus. All right. So, you know, bear that in mind. Bear that in mind. Ethics is not the subject of today's webinar. You will find some on the ACCA website. You will find some topic explainers, and there is a topic explainer that I did on ethics, and I would encourage you to have a look at that if you wanted to improve your exam technique in respect of ethics. For an 8-mark question, would you be better off answering, you know, leaving it when you've made 5 or 6 points? Yes, I think that's a general rule. If you've got to watch your time management, you've got to watch your time management. So the Let's have a look at some of these other questions that we've got coming in. How do we apply the conceptual framework in the exam? Occasionally, the question will make reference to the conceptual framework, and therefore you're naturally drawn to answering the question. But there may be times in the exam where it's relevant to bring in the conceptual framework, but it may require you to think and pick up clues. So for example, if you're looking at an accounting treatment of something that either you don't know about or you know there is no accounting standard, so things like Bitcoin, things like raising funds, what's the phrase? Raising funds, crowdfunding. So there's no standard on Bitcoins, there's no standard on crowdfunding. So in order to answer those types of questions, you've got to ask yourself, well, what's useful, what's relevant, what's reliable? Has an asset been created? Is there an obligation? Yeah, is there revenue? So you start to think about the conceptual framework when you don't know what the answer is and you're trying to reason it out. You also weave in the conceptual framework, I think, whenever you're dealing with an investor. So investors, sustainability reporting, investors want information which is useful to them. So it has to be complete. Yeah, it has to be complete. Okay, so you've got to have a complete sustainability report, which means looking at all the different greenhouse gas emissions, not just scope 1, but scope 2 and scope 3. So even if you're not necessarily all over the detail of a particular standard, think about what makes information useful, relevant, yeah, predictive, what makes information a faithful representation, in other words, it being complete and free from error. I hope that answers. Hema says, is it mandatory to use P in this answer? Can we use other ways to frame the answer? Not really, because the question says justify why it doesn't control. So in order to answer control, why it doesn't control, you've got to deal with the principles of what control is. In other words, you've got to answer the question. Talking about making up a definition of control or talking about associates is not the appropriate way forward. Umar says, is it necessary to know every bit of every standard? No. No, confession time. Possible. I don't know every bit of every standard. What's your goal? To be a good accountant? Yes. But actually, good accountants have the internet. Good accountants have books that they can refer to. Your goal is to understand the accounting standard. Your goal is to get 50% in the exam. 50% in the exam. That's what you're after. So you do not need to know every bit of every standard. You do need to be able to write something about every single standard. Yeah, the breadth of knowledge that you need to pass this exam exists and is real. Breadth is much more important than depth. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's a bit like being a GP, you know, it's a bit like being a general practitioner doctor. Yeah, you need to know a little bit about heads and hearts and bowels and you know, various parts of the body, skin rash. But then when it gets difficult, you go to a particular specialist. Why is it that the SBR performance never reaches 60%? Well, individual students a lot of individual students score well, 60%, 70%, that's fine. But it's the first exam that a lot of professional students sit, and it's a demanding paper. It would be lovely to think that it could, but the standard of scripts is the integrity of the ACCA is there, and if it's not good enough, they won't get a pass. And I'm afraid that's the way it is. That's the way it is. I'm doing the March sitting. I'm struggling where to focus my revision. Do I have any tips on how to build confidence? The model answers are so comprehensive, they leave me feeling worse than when I started. Abby, thank you for your question. It's more than one question. I'm going to break it down. Yeah? Struggling to focus my revision. That's relatively easy to answer. Mock exams. Yeah? Mock exams. We're in the mock exam season. Okay? It's about doing questions to time. It's about the practice platform a little bit more than the study hub. That's what you should be doing. And then when you've done the question, you can review it against the examiner's answer. And you've already identified that the model answers are so comprehensive. I showed you that marking guide. There were 11 marks available out of 8, but you only need 4 to pass. Okay? So don't try and say, I have got to play football like Lionel Messi. Don't try and say, you've got to be as good as Antoine Dupont when it comes to playing rugby. Don't, admire them, learn from them, but don't feel disheartened by your attempt. So be more realistic. Abby, in an ideal world, somebody is marking your work. It's something that I do a lot of at this time of year, mark my students' work, so I can give them feedback. Maybe, Abby, you have a colleague at work who is a qualified accountant. Maybe you have a friend or a colleague who is studying as well and could review your answer. A study buddy comes in handy. Or maybe you've got a tutor. And in an ideal world, everybody is with a tutor. In an ideal world, those tutors are marking your scripts. But I appreciate it's not an ideal world. Build confidence. You only need 50% to pass. Yeah, you are not trying to copy out or emulate the standard of the examiner's answer. Yeah, KISS. Keep it simple. All right, keep it simple. Yeah, that is my answer. Yeah, that is my answer. That is my answer. Right, I'm trying to get through. UK variant. Well, look, you've either entered the UK variant or you haven't. So the UK variant is something that is disappearing. But I don't particularly want to talk about that because that's really more relevant for June. You're on a date with destiny. You've either entered the international or you've entered the Irish or the UK. But the UK one is going. You won't need it in future to have a practicing certificate. Mohammed asks how to deal with the current issue. Can I be a little bit... There probably isn't going to be a current issue. The language of the examining team has moved towards investor focus. So question 4 is normally going to have somebody, maybe a director, maybe an investor, probably an investor, shareholder, maybe a lender, probably a shareholder, who doesn't understand something. Doesn't understand the need for sustainability reports. Doesn't understand why the tax paid in the cash flow is different from the tax charge in the P&L. Doesn't understand why we're recognizing an asset on the balance sheet that we don't legally own, thinks it's wrong. And so you've got to deal with the investor focus. And arguably, the investor focus is not a new part of the syllabus. It's just the whole syllabus, but looking through the eyes of you being a communicator and explaining the accounting standards, explaining practical issues in the accounts. So, Mohammed, it may not be a current issue. It will be an investor focus, more like to be an investor focus approach. Having said that, of course, you know, the standards on sustainability, they're new, and they are going to continue to be examined. In the September-December exam that has just been released, or was released last month, on which the examiner's report is based, there's loads on sustainability reporting. It's very, you know, there's a bit on ethics on the sustainability reporting. It's very clever. Musa says, how many questions need to be done in the practice platform? How many tickets do you need to buy before you win the lottery? How many shots at goal does Lionel Messi need before he scores a goal? How many penalty takes does it take before England score? The more the merrier, Musa. I'm not going to put a number on it. I'm just going to say the more the merrier. The more you practice, the luckier you get. Abin, do we need to quote the exact wording of the standards? No, 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 no. You do not need to quote verbatim. You do not need to quote verbatim the definition of impairment or provision or derivative or P or control. You need to get the gist. Yeah, you need to convey. And of course, in the model answer, the exact wording is used. Of course, they've got all day to write it. They can copy, cut, and paste it. You're in the exam on your own. Now, some of you might be sad enough or lucky enough to, you know, be able to remember a few of these things off by heart. Fair enough. Don't bother with accounting standard numbers or names, though. So, Elizabeth, do we need to know the standard numbers? No, no, no. I've never, ever, ever seen in any marking guide any reference to, if they happen to know that it's ISA 40 for investment properties, give them a mark. Just say the standard on investment property. I know the examiner's answers quote chapter and verse, so people can look it up and it looks better, but as already explained, the examiner is not showing you an answer that is good enough to pass. The examiner is showing you, the examiner is Lionel Messi. The examiner is Anton Dupont. The examining team. Anton Dupont is a Frenchman who plays rugby union for the French national team. Kushi, this is my second time giving SBR. Okay? The deferred tax chapter is not sitting right with me. Any advice? Okay. I've alluded to the study hub. I'm going to point you in the direction of the ACCA SBR page, the technical articles, and there are some explainer videos. So I have done, personally, an explainer video on deferred tax. And I'm not saying that it's everything you need to know about deferred tax, but what I've tried to do in that explainer video is to break it down, give you an understanding, and give you a minimum. So please, the ACCA are generous enough, kind enough to make resources available to you. So if you want to know more about deferred tax, go on the ACCA website, go to SBR, go to the examiner's articles, go to the articles, and you will find a topic explainer. Or just type in my name and the topic, and you might find it that way as well, because the way tabs work. I have an unusual name, Clendon. So if you put in Clendon deferred tax or Clendon leases or Clendon whatever it is, you might well find there's a podcast or a resource that I've done for ACCA or I've done on my own account that finds it. How do you know when you've written enough, Amaka? Because you're absolutely shattered? Because the time is up? Yeah, that's how you know you've written enough. I mean, in a way, you've never written enough, because your answer is, is never going to be as long or as detailed as it could, in theory, be if you had an unlimited amount of time. If it is worth 5 marks, you should be spending 8 minutes. If it is worth 5 marks, you should try and be saying 4 decent things. And if one of them's wrong, you've still got 60%. Yeah, I'll say that again one more time. How do I know if I've written enough? Yeah, because you're exhausted, because you've used up the time allocation well. If it's 5 marks, how much do you need to write? Well, you've got 8 minutes. And you need to think. You need to read and think. And you need, ideally, to come up with 4 things. Yeah? That coming up with the 5th is nice. Coming up with the 5th, but if it eats into your time for the next part of the question, that's inefficient. If you can say 4 things for 5 marks, 4 little sentences, try and use white space. Yeah, that's going to help. That's going to help. Now, I've got time, I think, for one last question. Elijah says, if a topic came up in the last exam, is it likely to come up again? Good question. Don't know. I mean, groups comes up every time, but it could be a group cash flow, or it could be a group P&L, or it could be a group statement of financial position. Ethics comes up every time, but in a different scenario every time. I don't think you can say, if something came up last time, I don't think you can say it's more or less likely to come up next time. Don't play that game. That's a gambler's game. If you toss a coin and it's heads, the next time you toss a coin, it is equally 50-50 whether it's heads or tails. The fact that it was heads last time does not influence, when you toss a coin, whether it's heads or tails. That's absolutely the case with ACCA. They are writing exams. There's lots of exams. Do not try and question spot. Do not try and question spot. Do not believe anybody who tells you, I know what's coming up in the exam. Yeah, all you have to do is look at this standard and that standard. Let me tell you, no. Yeah, there are charlatans. Yeah, be mature, be professional. It's a big syllabus. Be well prepared. Martin, thank you for your patience.